Are you interested in deepening your spiritual awareness and discovering your true nature as divine? Well, you're in the right place. Welcome to Align with the Divine. With me, your host, Patricia DiOrio, spiritual mentor, sacred storyteller, and professional intuitive. Join me and my amazing guests each week for a deep dive into the exciting world of spirituality. Align with the Divine will inspire you to embrace your innate power to create your reality. It will motivate you to move past your limited thinking, release your subconscious programming, and show you how to live in the present moment with clarity and focus. Get involved with the show. Send your email to patricia@patriciadiorio.com. This is Align with the Divine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Align with the Divine podcast. I'm Patricia DiOrio, and each week I'm honored and excited to share time with you, whether you're listening, walking your dog, driving your car, or maybe watching me on YouTube or my website, alignwiththedivine.net. Well, today we're going to discuss one of my favorite subjects. Are you ready? Aging. Aging, she said? Yes, aging. You know, I'm one of the original baby boomers, born in 45. And there are a lot of us on the planet today. And, you know, we saw our parents' age and our grandparents' age. And now we're in our 7th and 8th decades. So aging is up for us. And my guest today is going to be the perfect guest for this conversation. His name is Wayne Lehrer, and I call him the poster child for conscious aging. In fact, he's just completed his second book called Conscious Aging, and I'm really excited to read it. You know, spirituality is seeping into all the crevices and cracks of society today. Humanity is awakening. We're becoming more conscious. We're becoming more aware. Aware of what? That we're spirit in the body. Science tells us that we're energy beings in physical form and that everything is energy. And you know, I believe that when we can apply this idea of consciousness and spiritual awareness to the aging process, that we can extend our lives. We can extend way into our hundreds. Most of us baby boomers are in our 7th and 8th decades, but we're heading, into our 80s and 90s. It's right around the corner. And we can't live our lives the same way we used to live our lives. We need to apply spirituality to what we're up to. We need to deepen our awareness of spirituality. And in that vein, if you will, I've developed something that I call a spiritual assessment. It's kind of a quiz, and it's a free gift on my website, alignwiththedivine.net, and I would love it if you would go and take the quiz and let me know your thoughts about it. It's really about determining where you are. Are you really committed to your spiritual life, to deepening your spiritual life? Can you take it or leave it, kind of meza about it? Or maybe you're not interested at all, but I doubt, however, that you would be watching this if you weren't interested in spirituality as a topic. And so take the quiz and let me know your thoughts. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm offering a free discovery session, if you will, and also a free mini reading. So do the quiz and be in touch with me. I'd love to connect with you. And so Wayne Lehrer, he's a bit of a Renaissance man. He's had quite a career that has spanned many interests. He was in the entertainment industry. I'm reading a little bit, forgive me here. He was in the entertainment industry. He's been a theme park designer, an artist, a sculptor, an author, and perhaps most impressively, he has a unique practice as a meditation and yoga teacher. Wow. And he is the poster child for conscious aging. Wait until you see him. He also is the author of 2 books. His first book is called The Prodigy Within, The New Third Act. And his second book, Conscious Aging, The New Third Act, that I just mentioned. So I hope that you will enjoy this interview. I know that I'm going to enjoy it. And give us your feedback. Let me know through my website, how you like it. and maybe some topics that you would like to have me address in the future about spirituality. So let's now meet Wayne Lehrer, and let's hear all about conscious aging. Hi, everyone. Well, I'm very excited to introduce you to my new guest today. He's Wayne Lehrer, and he is the author of an amazing book that's coming out this summer called Conscious Aging. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart because, I'm one of those aging baby boomers like Wayne is. So I can't wait to get into this conversation with you, Wayne. Thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited too.
Good to see you, Patricia.
It's good to see you. So, why were you compelled to write this book? And what would you consider conscious aging? That's kind of a dual question. Let's take your why first.
Well, actually a bunch of friends motivated me. I was the guy that everybody said, "Man, you look amazing. What are you doing?" And I had kind of been doing all of the things that I suggest in my book kind of my whole life. I'd been eating right, I'd been exercising right, I understood the importance of sleep, I had a strong meditation practice, I did yoga, all of the the obvious things that come with aging. And but all of a sudden at 65, my body started sending me messages that were not so pleasant. I'd been bulletproof my whole life. Nothing really had ever gone wrong. In fact, I hadn't seen a doctor I'd been to a doctor once in 35 years. And, a lot of things had come and gone during that time that were health related issues, but with fasting and with exercise and with consciousness, I'd sort of made it through each one of them, and none of them became, more chronic kind of problems. But what did happen is at 65, all of a sudden, a number of things started happening at once: high blood pressure, AFib, all things that, really had nothing necessarily to do with not living right per se, and everything to do with aging. And so all of a sudden I was kind of brought to my knees, and I had to really look at, what the rest of my life was going to be about. And one of the big issues that I think motivate most people when it comes to finally being willing to look at and confront the issues that surround aging is this idea of, something happens in their life that impacts them so powerfully that it gets their attention. So whether it's a health related issue, it's different for different people. A lot of people, what it is empty nest. Other people all of a sudden going from working 5 days a week or whatever it is to living on a fixed income. A bunch of people, it's got to do with friends passing away and them confronting their own mortality.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. You open up your introduction with, this book is about waking up from the illusion of immortality. I like that.
Yes.
Because growing up, we have that, don't we? We don't think we're ever going to age. We just think we're going to be young indefinitely.
Yeah, I actually talk about it in the book. I talk about that the gift that every 21-year-old should get for their birthday is 1 month in their 75-year-old body. And unfortunately, the way the human mind works is 1 month after they came back from that month in their 75-year-old body, they would forget everything they learned, because we're so good at denial, and we want to live, we want to live in the pleasures of the moment.
Well, I think the beauty of one of the many beauties of your book is it really inspires us to live a great life in our older years. And true, taking care of our physical body is important, but it's never too late. Older people can start a yoga class, a stretch or whatever, to help get them motivated. So you talk about the third act. I think that's brilliant. The third act. It's our third act. Can you share about what you mean by the first, second, and third act? Because I think that helping people understand the transitions that we make really will help us understand how the potential we have in our third act.
Yeah, well, basically, historically, we've actually never had a third act. Historically, what happened is, from zero to the first act used to be from about 0 to 15, and so during the first act, it was about playing, it was about learning, it was about exploring, it was about being dependent. And then somewhere historically around 12 to 15 or whatever, you were forced out into working in the fields, labor, working as, doing child labor, or, any of a bunch of other things that sort of thrust you into your second act. And so up until the turn of the century of 1900s, the average lifespan was 47 years. Wow. So basically what happened was you were born, you went to work at your family's business. Somewhere along the way, your body aged tremendously. 47 was quite old for a number of people. And then you died at 47 before there was any idea of even retirement. And if you didn't, then you were just sort of pushed off into the position of being the grandparent taking care of the children while the parents were busy working, which wasn't all that bad, but it wasn't a real third act. So the first act, as I said, is this period of time. Now what it is from about 0 to college, we learn, we play, we explore, we just kind of discover who we are. We begin to understand some of our passions and predilections. We begin to recognize our gifts. And that's the first act. And the second act is really about achieving, acquiring, accumulating. It's about competing, succeeding, and acquiring. And so anywhere from, and for most people these days, the third act goes from 20 to the mid 50s or 60. For most people, it's around 60 years old.
I think so. And I think it's getting more too. I think there are a lot of people in their 60s that are still very, active.
Well, activity has nothing to do with it, but you did put your finger on something that's very important. And that is, so what's historically happened is the third act, as we've understood it, up until recently, I call it the new third act. So the old third act, the one that happened basically from the end of World War II on to till now, was this time of retirement where it was about comfort, security, being with your grandchildren. The average conversation was about my health problems, my doctor's visits, and my grandchildren, and maybe politics or sports.
And recipes.
for certain people, absolutely. And what happened during that time is your world began to shrink. Yeah. So you left your work where you were around 7 people or 500 people every day. Your kids left the house, so all of a sudden your family dynamics changed. You weren't being valued as much or called up as often to do things that were expansive. So during this period of the transition into the third act, people started downsizing their lives. Their lives got smaller. And when the idea of retirement first came about between the 1950s and 2000 now, is that was basically the format. What's happened, however, because of, we're the first generation that actually exercised. We're the first generation that actually thought about eating well. We're the first generation that are the children of modern psychology, where we actually have the facility of self-reflection. Nobody really had that up until the 50s or 60s. If you watch reruns of Mad Men, you could see right in the 50s and 60s how Draper was completely against the idea of psychology, of knowing yourself at all. So all of these things that happened recently all began to give us tools to elongate our life, to live more conscientiously, to make better choices. So, and then of course all of the explosion in modern medicine, where I had a knee replacement. Well, if I didn't have a knee replacement, my world would have got very small very quickly.
I had a shoulder replacement a year ago, and look at it.
There you go.
It's
right.
Amazing.
So yeah, one of my favorite things to do all my life has been to hike. if I couldn't hike, not only would I not be getting the exercise, but I would also begin to be depressed. Inadvertently, I would be the byproduct of this bad knee, would change all of my thinking around the quality of my life. So all of these things impacted our quality of life. Now, due to all of these things that I spoke of, the third act has the potential for being something really extraordinary. Not only that, but the life expectancy is no longer 47 years, it's around 80, soon to be 100.
Oh, it'll be 100 soon. And it's interesting because the Colonel Sanders of Kentucky Fried Chicken, he didn't even start that enterprise until he was 65 years old.
Yes.
And Grandma Moses also didn't.
Yes, and we're going to see many, many more people doing that, because here's the deal. Basically now, your third act can be as long as your second act. So from 20 to 60, from 60 to 100. So even if it's only 20 years long, that's still not, who wants to spend 20 years sitting in their Barco lounger with changing channels with a remote control? I don't, So then the big question is, what is the third act really all about? We know what the second act was about. It was about, getting money for our family, building a future that was financially stable. It was about developing our skill sets. It was about being a part of bigger processes than our own. So here we are at a third act, and a lot of that stuff just sort of gets taken away from us.
Yeah. And I want to make a comment here in light of that. I love, I think it's the seventh gift, the chapter in the book.
Uh-huh.
You talk about no purpose, no plan, no project, no life. I love that, because the second act is really when everyone has the purpose and the project and the collaboration and all of that. But we don't think about it in the third act because we're retired. I am not retired.
Right.
I'm going to be retired for a long time. I'm, active, just as active as I've been. Well, with my, things that I have to deal with physically. But I think that's brilliant, because if you ask someone who's in their 70s or 80s what their purpose is, they probably the average Joe, they look at you like, what? Purpose?
Yeah. They're basically, it's the honey-do list. That's and the garden, and picking up the grandchildren and going to their doctor's appointments. I hate to make life that small, but for many people, it becomes that small. Yeah. And since we have here's the most challenging aspect of making the transition from the second act to the third act. We have no role models.
Yeah. We're the role models.
Well, we're the role models, and we're all still struggling to make this transition.
Yeah, I know,
we are actually inventing it in real time. So like you said, yes, Grandma Moses and a number of other people did find their gifts later in life. But basically, if you got 20 or 30 years left to live, here's what happens. You've been delivered at the end of your second act with an incredible amount of skills. You have real interests in the world, things that you've been passionate about, books that you've read, political things that you've followed, global warming issues, whatever it is. And all of those things become the motivation for beginning to think about how you can make a contribution. And one of the things that happens for most people, let me back off for just a second and talk about something that's really the big problem when we talk about people like you and I being the role models. And that is that since there are no role models, and no one has really defined what the new third act is, because it's never really existed before.
Well, look, I want to interrupt you there. Look at Jane Fonda. Look at Jane Fonda, yes. and Rita Moreno and Lily Tomlin and those guys. They were on the cover of AARP magazine. They look remarkable, and they've probably had a tweak here and there, but so what?
But what a lot of them are, being valued for are the second act operating system.
That's true.
Let me give you an example. Cover of Art magazine, Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise, 57 years old, still does his own stunts.
Yep.
Now, if I'm going to be judging myself against doing my own stunts, my knee is not okay for stunts. Now, if it said Wayne Lehrer has written a book on conscious aging that has changed the lives of millions, okay, that's taking advantage of everything that everything that I've done in my whole life. And what I call it is fashioning an offering. Is that each of us have to fashion an offering. We have to look inside ourselves, see what our interests are, see what our gifts are, see what our predilection is, and see where our passions and gifts intersect with the needs of the world.
That's right. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I want to introduce this early in our conversation because it's really why I invited you. I'm about consciousness. And the consciousness that I'm about is owning our power as divine beings, ergo align with the divine. I'm about aligning with our divinity. You know, we cannot not be who we are. So I believe that we're God in form. You know, you can use another word. So I love the idea of bringing that idea of self-actualization to the table here, even if it's in the third act, because I believe, and I know I wouldn't say I would go so far as saying that I have a knowing that that we can actually have an incredible third act by making choices from the place in us that is realized, the place in us that is aware, awake, and conscious, which is why it's so important for the yoga and the meditation. You know, I've been doing yoga and meditation really pretty much my whole life.
Right.
So for me, it's probably why, you know, I don't look my age either, and I just turned 78. So it's like when I think that in 2 years I'm going to be fucking 80, I mean, really? So it's like the Patricia in me that is vital and excited and passionate about making a difference. And here's my goal. My goal is why? To help people wake up to who they truly are. Spirit in the body, having a human experience, wearing a mask of who they think they are, and occupying a meat suit. You know, and if that kind of a conversation, if that kind of level of awareness can be brought in, and you're clearly bringing it in your book, to a place where they know who they are, they know they're divine beings having a human experience, they know they're in this human experience that is an illusion that they're creating, then every single thought they think, they can, oh, that's a good thought, oh, that's not a good thought, keeping their vibrational frequency high with what they're choosing to do. And there may be people, there certainly are people that whose third act is about, you know, the grandchildren and the trips and the this and the that and the holidays and whatever, right? I mean, that to them, it's a meaningful third act. But what I think you're talking about, and I'm certainly supportive of, is a third act where people really go within and make that connection and know that there's something more than just being in this human experience, that they are spirit in the body. And that's why I love where quantum physics is going with this as well. You know, anyway, I wanted to introduce that early because that's my agenda for my life right now, is to help people wake up to the truth. And I know that if everyone could be in the conversation that we're divine beings in physical form, and then operate from our place of our divinity instead of our humanity, which means it takes presence and making choices. I believe that if that were to happen, in no time at all, we'd have heaven on earth.
Well, the way I talk about that in the book, and the way my understanding of that is that for most people, because of the necessities of life, they don't have the free consciousness available until the end of their second act to start considering these things. When you're consumed with raising children, making enough money for their education, health issues, paying your mortgage, and all of the issues that come in the second act that are all extensions of that operating system. During that time, you've been quietly acquiring the things that you're talking about eventually bringing into play. So some people like yourself and I may have been involved in the third act operating system our whole life. We may have always wanted to give back. We may have always wanted to contribute. I consciously chose to keep my overhead low so that I could put my attention on the things that mattered to me. Now, that's not something everyone has the free. I didn't choose that my whole life, but my son's been gone for 20 some years. You know, so I've been able to, during that time, I said, okay, if I keep my overhead low, then I don't have to spend tons of brain power energy fretting and being concerned and anxious about this and that. And instead I could bring that higher consciousness to bear on the things that I really do want to do and the things that matter. And I think for many people, what happens at the end of the second act, something gets triggered where a lot of people look at themselves and they go, have I really created anything of value? Am I still being valued? Am I considered valuable? And they start looking at ways in which, if they don't feel that's the case, or they do feel it, even if they do feel it's the case, how can I now extend that into a new arena where that becomes the center of my life, as opposed to earning and and the gratifying of desires and the ego and all the other things that are a big part of the second act. So I think you're right. The other thing is that, as you mentioned, we do have some role models. A lot of the focus doesn't go to the third act part of their nature. For example, we don't talk that, Jane Fonda, people talk about how great she looks, but Jane Fonda was traveling all over Africa, getting women to get educated and, helping the educational process there. Jimmy Carter is seen, Jimmy Carter left office. He was far more powerful after his presidency in his third act when he started Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah.
The impact he's had. And we can see that with lots of people. But those things haven't been valued as much because the third act and the very thing you're talking about that matters so much to you is only just beginning to be activated. And let me say one more thing about it.
Sure.
I believe that the baby boomers had a seed of this planted in the 60s. That the peace, love, we're all in this together, oneness, all of that was planted in us. Then what happened is life became life, and it called on us to do what we needed to do to build a family, to have our children, to build our family, to further our education, all of those things. And so we put that side of ourselves that felt the calling and recognized that seed being planted. We put it aside for a little while, but it was planted deep in our hearts. So I believe that what's happening is the entire baby boom generation is now, that seed is now sprouted and come up through the asphalt, and it's showing itself. And now there's a lot of confusion because it's like, well, what is it? I don't know. I mean, I talk to people all the time. I coach people our age to make it through what I call it the third act identity crisis.
Oh, go ahead.
Because it's exactly what happened between the first act and the second act for children.
Right.
They have an identity crisis, but then there were tons of role models, right? You wanted to be rich, there was Richard Branson. You wanted to be famous, there's Kardashian. You wanted to be a politically inspired person, there's Barack Obama or whoever it is that you think of, right? So there were tons of role models. And because we don't have that, a lot of people are stuck in this thing between the second and third act. So the energy's been released.
Yeah. And forgive me for interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, go on.
Yeah. Many of my clients today are women in their 60s who are saying, what? What now? What? And I said, that's right. You should be asking yourself that question because you have maybe another 20 years, 30 years, who knows, depending on how well you take care of your body. So it's definitely happening. And I think that people like you and you and I are going through the forest first with the machetes. And, we've lived our whole lives for the most part. I retired at 50 from social work and teaching. And I went into spiritual counseling with my degree and reading the Tarot of all things, So it's like, so that's really my practice and what I love to do. And when these clients come to me, I love to say to them, well, let's see who you are right now archetypally. Close your eyes, go inside and pick a card. It makes a difference if you're the hangman or you're the sun. So they have this new vista open to them of possibility of what they can do. And my next question is, well, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want to do? What do you want? That's the thing. And then a lot of times they say, well, I could never have that anyway, so I'm not even going to bother putting it out there.
Right. And many of them have put it asleep for so long. Women had gotten their degree and then they had children, and whatever they got their degree in, they now have had no exposure to for 20 years, or men had a real passionate interest, and somewhere in college, their parents said to them, but you can't make a living at that. So what I talk to a lot of people our age and ask them what makes you happy? They don't even know what makes them happy. Or if they say it, they're all within the realm of what are called in the realm of what I call authentic happiness. They're in the realm of the pleasures and pleasantries, fine dining, taking a cruise up the Danube, spending time, playing soccer with my grandchildren. And so a lot of us have to sort of it's a pretty courageous thing to do, to have to say, I don't really know myself all that well right now.
Yeah.
Because it's a fresh start.
If
you think you're at the end because you're 60 years old, then it's just a downhill slide. But if you realize, wait a second, I can do anything I want now. I've got my home, my kids are gone, I'm either happily in my marriage or I've separated and I'm, living and I'm in this new life. What is it that turns me on? What is it am I passionate about? Where in the world can I make a contribution that is needed?
Yeah, that's an important question. And what I find with the women that I've been working with, and it's mainly women, although I have one client, a young man, who's quite an anomaly for his age as far as his consciousness goes. But these women, they start thinking of things that excited them. Like, I was thinking of doing healing, and a lot of them are moving into healing because it deepens their spirituality. I also want to talk about the importance of taking care of our physical bodies, and how people have this already always listening, I call it, from all the landmark work, that as you age, that's it. This is just it. This is the process, blah, blah, blah. Well, truth is that I'm menstruating at 78 still, every month. Okay. And 17 years ago, I found this incredible woman called Susie Wiley that wrote a book called Sex, Lies, and Menopause. And what she was saying is that when you can duplicate the hormones, when you biomimetic, when you can mime the hormones in your body in a natural way, through natural organic substances, then you keep your hormones going in your body, and you're going to age very gracefully. So that's what I've been doing. And it has made a huge, gigantic difference in my life. But then I have friends that say, well, but that's not normal. But that's not, that's not, you're going against what's so known is that everybody ages. I said, yeah, I'm still aging, but I'm using technology, and I'm losing what I have learned and makes sense to me. And, also resonates with me when I ask my body how it's doing. My body has been fabulous. The 17 years I've been doing this, I haven't had any problems, nothing. So that's kind of a long introduction to what I wanted to say. What do you think of all the technology that's happening today? No, it's pretty amazing. And just, we have titanium body parts, Yeah.
I think, as you said, having limited scope of ability physically is obviously probably the single biggest hindrance to having a healthy third act, an expansive, happy and engaged, strong relationships. If your body's not healthy, you're less mobile, you're going to see people less often, and this, and, all of these things. So I'm in agreement with you. Now, the issue is the first thing that somebody who is older has to do. So not everybody's going to have the experience you have, but everybody can be where they are. And from that place, they can excel. As you said, somebody can do yoga, start yoga now. And listen, if you can't touch your toes, now I can lean over and put my hands flat on the ground with my legs straight. But let's say you can only touch your knees. If you got your fingers down to your shins or your ankles, that's a home run. That's a lot. That's a lot more mobility just on a physical level. Now, that same mobility crosses the board in every dimension, right? You need the same, because what happens is that's part of our world growing smaller, is that our physical world grows smaller. So as you said, there's less options. There's tons of opportunities. If you can know, I mean, one of the worst things that happen to people is they have this idea that this is how I exercise. Well, that was how you exercise. That may not be how.
I remember your 7 mile, 5 mile run story. Tell me
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the deal is look at, if I can't run 7 miles anymore, I can still hike 5 miles. And guess what? I'm a firm believer in that you should kill six birds with one stone, so to speak. So if I'm gonna go get exercise, for me, it's a chance to hang out with a friend. So I've got relationship, I got community. It's a chance to be in nature. So I'm getting beauty and color and natural sunlight. It's a chance to breathe lots of deep oxygen as opposed to being in the gym. It's a chance to visualize expansive vistas. I mean, just that single thing, to see big vistas. When somebody's life gets small, they don't see beyond their TV set, or they don't see beyond the narrow street that they're driving down. The world caves in. So all of these things that we do, both metaphorically, like getting a vast vista, and physically, okay, if I can't run, I can walk. If I can't run, I can hike. If I can't hike, I can walk. And the benefits now of hiking, it's considered to be of walking is considered to be the single best form of exercise you can get. Now, I took up swimming, which everyone says is the best form of exercise. It's fantastic. Now, I know for me to swim, if I swim, I like to swim 4 or 5 days a week for 25 to 40 minutes at a time.
Wow.
If I swam 6 days a week, I'd hate swimming. I'd give it up. And part of what happens when we get older is we find reasons not to do that stuff, because it's a lot harder to motivate yourself to do exercise when you're older and haven't been doing it for a while. So we all have to navigate and renegotiate and remediate all of these issues to say, what works for me now? Can I start where I am and not put my expectations of who I was before and how physical and athletic I was? Can I not let those hinder me and become something to keep me from doing it, and slowly build up what exercise is going to look like for me in my third act?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and I'd love to talk about this too, is where we are. We're in the midst of this huge paradigm shift that's happening that was catapulted us into this shift was, of course, COVID. And what's been happening over these past several years. Personally, I think it's been an amazing opportunity for humanity to really wake up. I mean, we're like the caterpillar that's overeaten in the chrysalis, and we're breaking down into this mush, and we're in breakdown now. But I think that where this brainstorm that you've had to really bring this work out and to do the book and to be speaking about it and all of that, I think has really been a part of humanity's awakening.
Yes.
This is the way we are the harbingers of that awakening.
Well, and it's not a moment too soon, because not only are we as baby boomers in our 11th hour, so to speak, but we as a species are in our 11th hour, and our planet is in its 11th hour. So if we as the predominant species who cause the most damage and who could have the most impact on transforming it, if we don't personally transform ourselves through this 11th hour thing of continuing to destroy ourselves, continuing to, eat poorly, not get proper sleep, not take care, so that we're available to do the work of addressing these 11th hour issues, both in our environments and planetarily. So I think that, and to me, that is the very nature and calling and gift of the third act, to show up to do that.
Yeah. Well, humanity is evolving, period. It's evolving. You can't stop the evolution of humanity. And I think that a big part of our evolution is a major shift in our thinking about aging. I'm not talking about immortality. I have to tell you a funny story. I had this client once that paid me $800 a month to research stories of immortality of people that have lived way beyond, the average I can remember calling Bruce Lipton. I knew him enough to call him in those days. And, he was saying that we could live on water, our bodies could live on water and sunshine, like plants. That we can live on water and sunshine. So I think that we're barely scratching the scratch of our potentiality of how we could stay in the body and not be decrepit old people in our hundreds, but be vital people and writing and speaking. And, now that Zoom is here, it makes it so much easier to address people from all over the world. So I think this is inevitable. And I think that we are pioneers with it. And obviously people that are in their 70s now, aren't going to start a yoga practice that's going to come anywhere near a practice if you've been doing it your whole life. Your body is just a different body, So, but I think it's very encouraging. And I admire you for stepping into that as your choice for how you want to make a contribution in your third act.
Well, the issue really isn't to get back to anything that we were before. The issue is to maximize everything that we have before us now. And one of the biggest problems for most people making a transition into their third act is not accepting that it's all different now. That the game plan's different, the body's different, my skill sets have changed, I have limitations. I have limitations. I hear most people, when they talk about third act success stories, are people that have overcome limitations. Yeah. Maybe you overcome them, but maybe you just figure out how to work with them in a way that brings you freedom and joy. It's like anyone who's not going to overcome their limitations, that's really a recipe for depression, and that's not healthy. But having a limitation, whatever it is, like, for example, if a person does have a knee issue and they can't hike as much, okay, they can get a stationary bike and they can ride that stationary bike with 40 other people at the gym to really cool rock and roll music and have an amazing time. Now, if they hold it in their head that they have a limitation and they let that limitation keep them from discovering other ways to do it. So one of the things that I really believe that I think is unique to the way I've sort of looked at this entry into the third act is it's the very nature of where we are that's demanding us to be more conscious. So the fact that we have these limitations, the fact that maybe we're now on a fixed income, the fact that we have an empty nest, and it's like, I have a story of a man in my book who he was worth $16 million. He ran one of the largest he was the publishing editor of one of the largest magazines in the world. And in 2008, his daughters both went away to college. His business, he left the company he'd been working at for 35 years, and the 2008 financial crisis happened, and he lost $11 million in 1 month. And he discovered that he was an alcoholic. Oh, one other thing. Once the daughters were gone and the money was gone, he found out that he and his wife had nothing left in common, because all they had in common for the last 5 years was the girls and all the money they had to spend. So his whole life went to pieces. And he went through this process, this third act identity crisis, where he said, wait a second, I'm not the job. He'd had a job running a company where he was God. No one ever questioned his, if he said something was going to happen a certain way, that everyone agreed with it. So all of a sudden, his whole world came apart, and he had to rethink everything. And the testimony, to him is he did. He started his own little publishing company, started small. He had tons of contacts. It helped him get back into his relationships. He sold his 16-bedroom house with horse stables and 2 tennis courts and downsized into a nice small house that he and his new wife now live in happily, and he's got a life. So rather than judge himself, and it took him a long time to get out of that headset, he's an extreme example, but each one of us has to go through that, because each one of us in some ways between the second and third act suffer losses. That's part of aging. It's what we do with those losses. In fact, I have a chapter in my book. It's pain is inevitable, suffering is
optional. Yeah.
Right. And this is the case. He could continue suffering over that. What a lot of people do is they tell you the story about what was.
Right. They
live in the past. A lot of people. Right. How many people do you know in their 60s, 70s, and 80s? All they talk about was what was.
Yep. That's
right?
So true.
And if the story you're telling is the life you're living. And if the story you're telling is what was and what isn't anymore, then what do you have now? So right. If somebody doesn't take the time to, to really question, what story do I want to live now? What do I want to do with the next 20 years of my life? And and I believe it's the very confrontation of this struggle, of this suffering, of the loss, of what I call the shattering that happens for a lot of people between their second and third act that gives us the motivation to start making really conscious choices, to turn to the spiritual life, to recognize that in our entire life, as much as we thought we were in control, there is a power greater than us behind everything.
Greater than our
all
egos.
Things that are kind of we're ready to finally accept and explore.
I am a big fan of Michael Singer's work, The Untethered Soul. Have you read that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, of course. And his newer book, The
Surrender Experiment.
Yeah.
One of my favorites.
Yes, me too. I love it. And he talks about the end of that. He talks about something I hadn't really thought about before, but I've always been in this conversation of, look, take responsibility for the choices you make. If you're not happy with that choice, make another choice in the moment. It's about being present in the moment to do that. He talked about unconditional happiness, meaning that right now I choose to be unconditionally happy in my life, no matter what happens, no matter what it is, no matter how, whatever, the worst thing I could think of, that I choose consciously, make that choice to be unconditionally happy. That I've been thinking so much about that since then, because if we make that choice from a place of knowing who we are, then that will be our experience. We will be happy regardless of what happens. So I think a big piece of the re-education of people, of course, I want to make an aside here. The baby boomers, we had that peace and love and making a difference on the planet instilled in us, as you pointed out earlier. And that's still there. That's seen, and I think it's grown to, and then they had a big intermission as they went into their second act. Now they're getting in touch with that feeling again, and I think our work in education, in educating them, is to really help them come into alignment with the power that they have to make that choice, the power that they have to say, I choose this, I choose to be a healer, I choose to be a writer, I choose to be, whatever. And yes, our bodies definitely can be an impediment. But then again, it's never too late to start something.
Right, and to think of the limitations of the body as an impediment is not the right thing. They are the actual inspiration to find a new way to do it. Yeah. One of the things that I think that impressed me the most about Michael Singer's book, Surrender Experiment, is that he lived a third act life his entire life.
I know.
He didn't live, he never did anything for money. He didn't care about prestige and power and success, any of that stuff. So he basically has been in his third act. So he's a really good role model of the third act, even though he's been doing it now for 60 years, right? But the thing that he did, which is the essence of what I believe the book was about, he did three things. He never compromised his spiritual practice. Every day he did meditation. Every day he did yoga. That was the first thing. Second of all, and you sort of brought this up, situations, you open yourself to new situations. It doesn't mean they're going to go the way you want them to go. So you have to be able to surrender to what is. So he surrendered to the positive stuff that came his way and the negative things, quote unquote, that came his way, because in that realm of what you call unconditional happiness, there is no negative thing because it's all there for my growth, my spiritual growth.
Exactly. Every encounter is a teacher.
Right. And the third thing that he did, and this is critical and I think really unique is he did a spiritual practice every day. He surrendered to everything and he showed up for everything at 100%. So for us to be able to show up for our life at 100% in our third act is the most challenging part. Surrendering is plenty difficult, you know. Spiritual act, okay, we can practice meditation, we can do things like that, and that's great, you know. But this idea of showing up at 100%, the thing that keeps us from it is all of the resentments and regrets that we have about the past, that we haven't processed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of the ideas about how we think we should be in the present that may or may not have any truth, validity, or likelihood of ever being so again.
Yeah, collective agreement. We get sucked right into that collective agreement and we're gone.
Exactly. And then the third thing is this precept about what the future is going to be, as opposed to opening ourselves and inviting it in. And I believe based upon a real strong look at our gifts, our passions, what attracts us in the world, where we think there's a need for our gifts. And then here's the deal, and this is what Michael did, I think, so beautifully, is then you just start investing yourself in the little steps that take you there. Mm-hmm. In other words, if you're interested in global warming, then you volunteer at a place that picks up trash on Saturdays and Sundays. You know, whatever it is you do. And all of a sudden, those things, I call a process, and I believe it's more true in our third act than any other time. I call it following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, flow.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be willing to say, I don't have to know exactly where I'm going and what it's going to look like when I get there. I just need to know that this feels good today. This feels true for me. This feels spiritually aligned to my purpose. This feels that like the best use of my gifts, my brain, my talents, and then just start showing up for that.
Yeah. I'm working with a fabulous book, a series of books. There's 10 of them now. It began with one book in 2015 when it came into my life. It's called I Am the Word. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a channeled text by a man by the name of Paul Selig. Have you heard of him?
I haven't.
You haven't. It's called I Am the Word, and it is, having been on the spiritual path for a very, very long time, I always believed that we were spiritual beings having a human experience. And when this book came into my life, it's moved me from believing it to knowing it. And I don't say that in an arrogant way. I'm saying that in a way where I know it. I know I am divine and we are all divine, which is why I'm so passionate about my work. And one of the things, Wayne, that they talk about that I just love is, well, three things. But the second one I'm going to begin with, it's letting go of the past, willing to experience your reality outside of history, definition, how we've defined ourselves and let other people define us, and collective agreement, those three things. Yep. And they really talk about this. It's about really letting go of that and opening up to the possibilities that are out there. So embracing the unknown is, I think, a key part of our work is in helping people understand that we create from what we know. But what about the unknown? The unknown is beyond what we know. So it's exciting. It's like looking for that other vista past this mountain or whatever. It's like, what's the unknown hold for me? And I think that invigorates us. It invigorates me. I get excited when I think about what's beyond the known. So it really goes back to Michael's work about surrender. He wrote The Untethered Soul after he went through all of these experiences with the surrender experiment. Right. He wrote the book after. So anyway, I wanted to emphasize that. And the other thing is vibration. We're hearing so much now about vibration with quantum physics and energy and Einstein and all of the stuff that's been coming out for a long time. But everything is vibration. Everything is frequency. So if we understand that everything is frequency and understand that when we have a negative thought taking us down into that fearful hole of whatever it is, then that's what we're going to create. So the education really needs to help people be aware that they're vibrating at a frequency. And if they're depressed and, they're going they're going to stay there. But about making another choice in the moment that lifts them up, just making another choice to have a positive thought to replace the negative thought, is going to make a difference. So that's really that's how I see my work cut out for me. That's really what I want to do.
Beautiful.
So I use this text in my counseling practice, and when I speak on summits and stuff, I talk about it. It's amazing. I would highly suggest, given your level of awareness, that you might pick up the book and take a look at it. I would love your hit on it.
What's the name again?
I Am the Word.
Okay.
By Paul Selig. Are you into any channeled material?
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm
okay.
familiar with it. I've read the Course in Miracles and a number of other things over the years.
You have, okay. Well, I did Course in Miracles for many years, and the Abraham work too, and but I hadn't been doing any kind of channeled material until this came into my life, and that was 8 years ago. So it's been life-changing.
Oh, very nice.
And it's really helped to move me into my third act with this knowing that, wait a minute, I have the power to be able to make a choice to do this.
Yes.
And then just make that choice and do it. Unconditional happiness. So I've been saying every day in my meditation, I choose unconditional happiness in my life.
There you go. Well, and that is the process of self-actualization, right? You are actualizing your true self.
Exactly.
With all your gifts, with all your talents, with all your passions, with all your interests, and with all your heart and soul.
And that's why, if I'm interested in something, I read all of your information. I'm sorry I didn't get the book earlier. But when I'm passionate about something, I don't really need to do a script and write a lot of stuff, because I just really want to connect with the person, and see how we can come together to move this conversation forward of who we truly are.
Yes.
And what you're doing is you're taking an area that is so important, because boy, our bodies get our attention.
Well, I think that the mistake that a lot of us make or forget about is that real change requires two things. One, what you've just talked about, which is this idea that anything's possible, that the future is unknown, that even if I burned it all down, there's still plenty of hope and plenty of opportunities. And the other side of that is that we have a opportunity to show up by looking at who we've been and what we've done, and seeing that all of that is basically the rough material, the raw material of this new person.
Foundation, really. It's
yes, exactly.
It's a foundation. Yeah.
So our life. So it's not a wasted lifetime. It's not something that I'm no longer able to do. It's that I'm taking all of the diverse aspects of myself and bringing them together. And in the process, I do have to let go of my ideas about what I've been. But part of the way I do that is what you said. I have this idea about anything's possible, where I can go. And I start, one of the qualities that's predominant in the first act and that has to come back in the third act is curiosity.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you look at a lot of older people, they have no curiosity anymore.
They don't care.
This is what they said: been there, done that. Everything is something that they've already experienced. I teach a workshop in China. And when I go to China, the workshop, the amazing thing about the Chinese is they haven't had the New Age experience. They got cut off from their spirituality since the time of Chairman Mao because of the Cultural Revolution. And so these people are wide open. So I come in with this passion and this energy and this message that has been, honed in, the West, particularly in California, this message of hope and of vision and of a new world. And they don't say been there, done that. They just are wide open. And it's so amazing to sit in a group of people where you don't have to cut through all of their preconditions, all of their belief systems, all their ideologies, all their concepts. And instead, they just open up. So one of the things that we do, I do a breath practice, a breathing practice at the end of it. And at the end of 25 minutes of breath work, there's usually 100 people in the room at a time. And at the end of 25 minutes of 100 people breathing together, they're invited to just let out and make sounds, and basically to scream and yell, Because now these people have not expressed their emotions ever. It's part of the culture, the Chinese culture, and it's part of the political nature of what communism was there. So when I do it in America, the average group of people screams and yells for about 20 seconds, 30 seconds maybe. When I do it in China, 3 minutes. I can't over the microphone, I can't talk loud enough to say, okay, let's come back. That's how much they need to express themselves. And I think we could all use a little bit of that innocence that we've lost.
Yeah.
And I think the best way to bring it back is curiosity, and the thing that you said, which is anything's possible.
And playfulness, being playful. You know what I do? I go to the ocean.
Yes.
And, even if there are people around, the ocean is loud and everything. And I just belt it out, man. I just, it's wonderful.
Patricia, at your age.
Yeah, that's right.
You are, I guess,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The age you want to be.
That's right. Well, I was sitting with my son and his lady in Austin. He's moved to Austin from LA. And I was sitting at this outdoor place and water and everything. It was lovely. And I sat there and I looked at him, and he was looking at me, and he's of course very attentive with me now because I've had my shoulder and stuff. I got back stuff going on. And I said, Jim, it's really landing for me that I'm an old lady. I am an old lady. I hate being an old lady, It's like that kind of ego mind came up. And then there's that place where I can just rest in who I am and what I bring to the table and my gifts and how much I want to give them. And I know that as I keep moving forward and going with flow and following the breadcrumbs, that my work's going to show up in the most powerful way it can. So I'm excited about this podcast. You're going to be one of my very first guests.
That's great.
It's a brand new podcast.
One of the things that I write a daily thing I call a daily fortune cookie.
Yeah. Did you get my curiosity comment today?
Yeah, curiosity. I don't know if you saw one a couple of days ago. It was this idea that my tree is heavily laden with fruit. Who will ease me of the pain of my own abundance? And I believe that that's where most of us in our third act are.
Oh, I got it.
We have so much to give.
Yep.
Instead of thinking just because I've lost my job and things have changed that I don't know, I have so much to give. Who will ease me of the pain of my own abundance? And the process then is one of like looking out and seeing where can I find ways to give it away? And that's what keeps us young. And that's what keeps it. So this idea, because part of what you said about getting old is part of not having role models is that we don't value the idea of elder, mentor, and sage. These are who you're supposed to be when you get to be 60. They're not something that only some guy from India who sat in a cave for 40 years achieves. This is when you take a lifetime of experience, you really look at it, take it into meditation, take it into your heart, do therapy, do whatever it takes to digest it and to recognize who you are and own the growth of it. Then you have something to give, and then it's our job to step forward as the elders, as the mentors, and as the sages, and that is the calling of the third act. And it's no longer about ego. One of the things I started to say earlier, and this is a good place for us to bring it back to the beginning conversation, is our first act is about dependence. Our second act is about independence, and our third act is about interdependence.
Yeah.
So only in our third act, the way we become interdependent, because we've been moved out of all the other places where we were, is we become elders, mentors, and sages. We find the way to give back a lifetime of experience through the wisdom that we've garnered in a fashion commensurate with our skills and our talents and our passions.
And our abilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one to make.
Well, that's great, Patricia.
Yeah, it's a yummy conversation for me. And I get excited when I meet people like you who, and I came there because I didn't know anything about you before Unity, except that it was on conscious aging. I said, well, I remember I told you I just written a speech saying the new age of aging, which was called
Yeah.
the new age of aging, right? Oh gosh darn it. What were you just saying a moment ago? I wanted to make a comment about
Elder, mentor, sage.
yeah. My degree's in counseling psychology, so I've been a counselor my whole
Yeah.
life, whether I was a spiritual counselor or a regular counselor. I was social work administrator for 23 years. But recently, since I've been going through these books, there's 10 of them about I Am the Word, these channeled texts. I said, you're really not a counselor. I mean, you can be a counselor, but you're a mentor.
Yeah.
Because you've done it and
Yeah.
you are doing it and you're in the midst of doing it. You're in the midst of facing your challenges and making other choices and not going down that rabbit hole of fear about this, that, or the other thing. So that's what I call myself now. And when I looked at your 12 archetypes of service,
Right.
the mentor jumped out at me, and also the performer. That jumped out a little bit, but I think it's true that we really need to be the mentors and the role models, because then we're not just talking from, a book, or talking we're talking from our own experience.
And that fortune cookie I was talking about was if we leave the world and don't be mentors and sages, if we go into our own little cocoons and start to retreat, who's going to guide the world? We're the people with the skills and the knowledge. We're also some of the people that broke it. We have the most capability of doing it. And just because young people got all this energy and drive, I'm in a position right now. I work with a bunch of young people. They've naturally come to me, not as a father figure. They want a mentor. They see somebody who's living a quality life, who's happy, who's engaged, whose body is highly functional, who's vivacious and full of energy. That's attractive to them, and they want to find a way. They see the necessity. So if we're not giving back to the world, then we're withholding, and that's not a loving act. And the world is in the greatest level of need that there really has been.
Yeah, it's huge. So you're embarking on a wonderful journey with this conscious aging, and I know you do many other things too. The Prodigy Within, I love that title, because the Prodigy Within is our God self.
Yes.
That's who it is. That's who we are. And if people knew that, I think if people knew we were God, and one of the things the guides say in the channel text is, you cannot not be God. Cannot not be who you are. So if everyone really got that and really got it and lived their life from that place, you wouldn't need anything else.
Yes.
Because you always be making the right decision in the moment, because you would be in your divinity. I use a symbol in my work, an equilateral cross, horizontal line perfectly equal to the vertical line. And to the left, and that horizontal line is immanent divinity. It's everything that we see in the world that's in form. But if you looked at it under the proper magnification, it's empty space, right? The illusion of the world. The vertical line represents transcendental divinity, everything that we don't see. But science tells us that this empty space is filled with an infinite number of subatomic particles, right? Of stuff of creation. So the left of that horizontal line is the past. The right of that horizontal line is the future. Where do we live? Most people live in the past, worrying about what happening in the future, but what they don't get is that they're in the now moment, creating it. So where we want to be living, in my opinion, is right at the nexus of those two worlds, divinity and humanity, right at that nexus of knowing that we're divine beings in a human experience, with our divinity trumping our humanity, meaning that awareness is key. And
yes.
then we're not going to be doing this from the past to the future. We're going to be aligned.
Well, and I believe that's the invitation of our third act.
Yeah.
To show up there. That's what I believe. And I think that a lot of people are hearing that call. A lot of people haven't made the transition yet, or they're in the midst of it, and it may be still uncomfortable, a little bit sloppy, a little bit difficult, but they're engaged. And I believe a lot of us are going to make it through there. And this is the potential of a completely new way of showing up for life.
Absolutely.
You
It's
know?
exciting. It's
Yeah.
exciting. So I'm really excited about your work. So we should probably wrap up here, and I'm going to probably have to edit some of this stuff. I'd like a pearl of wisdom, something we can close this show with. What would you say? What's the pearl of wisdom that comes to mind for all the listeners and viewers of this podcast?
Oh man, you're asking a lot.
Well, take the one that comes up most prevalently.
Well, I'll tell you one of my very favorite things, and I think it's one of the most important things of the third act. Since a lot of us still live in our second act as we age, and we judge our third act by our second act, what we tend to do is forget how good things really are. It's easy to complain about what isn't anymore and what I can't do anymore and what I don't have anymore. So I have a thing I say, walk in gratitude and live in grace.
Oh, that's
And
good.
nothing has, they've done studies and they've shown that nothing moves the needle on happiness, depression, PTSD more than a daily gratitude practice. And just to show up and let people know you value them, to recognize that you can even walk, whatever it is that you can do, to have that passion, to be grateful, as opposed to let that story, what you call the collective
consciousness,
consciousness
collective
of the world.
agreement.
Yeah, I call it agreement reality. Instead of letting agreement reality come in and take away your joy and your happiness, walk in gratitude and live in grace.
I'm so glad that you gave us that pearl of wisdom about gratitude, because that was one area that I wanted to touch. So you did. It was perfect.
There we go.
Thank you so much. This was very fun. I enjoyed myself.
Thank you. It was delightful. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Oh, you're so welcome. And really good luck with your launching the book this summer. When is it coming out?
Sometime probably in the fall.
Oh, it's going to be coming out in the fall?
Yeah, it's called The 7 Gifts of Conscious Aging.
The 7 Gifts of Conscious Aging.
Yes, a guide to an inspired third act.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. Well, I wish you all the very best in your third act.
Thank you.
And you've got the passion to fuel that unlimited potential and moving forward. Wayne, I understand that you have a gift for all of our listeners and viewers. What is that?
Oh, well, having completed my book, The 7 Gifts of Conscious Aging, I started the companion book, and the companion book is called 365 Days of Conscious Aging, Inspired Fortune Cookies for a New Third Act. And so if you'd like to be the recipient of that, just take my email address, wayne@prodigywithin.com. Send me an email and I'll put you on the list.
Right. Yeah. And I've been getting them and they are really, really fun. So check them out, everyone. Thanks for listening and viewing today, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for joining me today on Align with the Divine podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you'd like to learn more about my work, I invite you to my website, alignwiththedivine.net. And on the homepage, I'm giving away a free gift. It's a masterclass I did called The 7 Keys to Successful Manifesting. Pretty much lays out the bones of my work. Also, for a limited time only, between now and the end of August, just for the summer, I'll be giving complimentary tarot sessions, 30-minute sessions valued at $90. So if you're interested, reach out to me using my email, patricia@patriciadiorio.com, and I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks again for joining me today, and namaste.